It's
I
great.
know. This
I
is
love I love
familiar.
I love that we're having guests come back. It's the best. And now we get to go
Can,
deeper.
can you show off
Yeah.
that swag for a second? This
Oh
looks dope.
yeah. You gotta get the back too.
Ooh.
Oh shit. I wish I was wearing my colors today. I think we could go head to head in a merch off.
Yeah.
Um, all right, man. Well, great to have you on. I think we just had a good chat with Ian and Will from Syndicate. I've been following closely. I think you kind of alluded to some of the things you guys were working towards in the fall in our last interview that we had you on probably about a month ago at this point. I tweeted, "Is this a new token launch pad?" And your team was like, "Hell no." I mean, I don't think they said that specifically. They maybe took issue with my framing there, but as far as I can see, it seems to be pretty interesting new launch mechanism here if we're
Yeah.
looking at sort of how to bootstrap liquidity for new tokens, how to do that in a way that is the most token holder aligned, maybe some of
Yeah.
the issues with the most popular ways those are done today. So
Yeah.
maybe we could just kick it off and level set us here. What is this and why is it important?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the community launch is important because it is basically a much more fair and equitable way for a protocol to launch. It's especially exciting because by virtue of launching on Aerodrome, you're also launching on Coinbase thanks to their DEX integration. But it means teams, don't have to work with market makers, don't have to give away 5-10% of their supply to a centralized exchange. And they get that sort of instant bootstrapping of liquidity, instant distribution via a centralized exchange without any of the sort of things that usually create these giant drags on tokens when they launch.
Can you just kind of walk us through the life cycle of the launch from where they are today with Viero's, voting to this pool going live and kind of what happens in between?
Yeah, I mean, I will take us back first because this is probably the second time a launch like this has occurred, and of course, the first time was the launch of the Aerodrome token, right? And the launch of the Aerodrome token was incredibly unique in that there was no liquidity seeded into the initial LP. There was no market maker who was given tokens to initially make that market or build that liquidity. And there certainly wasn't like a centralized exchange given tokens. So what did we do? What we did was we deposited as voting incentives, some of that initial liquid Aero supply. So the first group of people to be able to choose like how much of their voting power to allocate, how much of that initial supply that they wanted was VE Aero voters. So they were the first ones to hold the liquid token. Now that gave them an incredible opportunity because then they were the ones who had the ability to seed the initial liquidity on the token. There was no price set, right? There was no market maker active, true community, pure like market mechanisms at work. So like in the early moments of that Aerodrome launch, if the first person went in with like $100 on either side, right? They were earning in theory like an infinite APR on that. So high risk, high reward though, because nobody knew sort of where the market was going to resolve on price. And then people add a little bit more and a little bit more, and people are trading and it's volatile. But price discovery happens organically. It is only the community that's deciding how to participate in either trading it in those low liquidity moments or depositing LPs. And of course, over the successive hours and days, what we found was, millions of dollars in liquidity have been seeded. It was a totally fair and equitable process. It was pure market mechanisms. And that is basically what we're trying to recreate with this syndicate launch. I think with the syndicate team, we found somebody who shared a lot of the same values as us. This first principles thinking on what launches should look like, and who is willing to sort of take the same leap of faith. So where we're at in the process right now, Syndicate has deposited about 1% of their fixed supply as an incentive for VE Aero voters. So voters have until Epoch Flip next week, which is Wednesday, midnight UTC, to decide how much in Aero voting power to direct that pool, right? And Aero emissions have a monetary value. So in some ways, they are the ones sort of setting the initial price, that initial ratio. And then they will be the first ones holding the liquid token who have the opportunity to begin to deposit into that liquidity pool and grow things from there. But the most important thing here, right, is that there was no backroom deal on, what the price of these tokens were. There isn't a market maker who's going to be seeding that initially. The syndicate team doesn't have to take on the legal and regulatory risk of doing any of these actions themselves. And hopefully we have like a very, very exciting community launch. And by the way, it's also trading on Coinbase immediately after. And this is the sort of stuff that, I think is the vision we've had for DeFi from the beginning. We used to have more fair launches like this, and then we sort of got away from it. And then to have that instant centralized exchange distribution has been like the dream the whole time, that they're just distributing DeFi rails, right? There's no legal review. There's none of this usual stuff, straight distribution to 100 million traders on Coinbase. And I think that's what we're super excited about.
Yeah, I find that interesting. So I think there is a trade-off here that is maybe best defined by complication in some way. Like I think Josh and I were talking about how we finally bought some Aero tokens to lock, and even just going through that process is one that you have to make a series of fairly big decisions in how long should I lock up my tokens, and so like the math is maybe hard, and the barrier to getting into it is, this is a launch that is for most easy to participate in if you are an Aero community member, a VE Aero voter. And of course, there's a much larger market out there than that. And I think, we put this up against, say, meme coin launches, which clearly have a lot of downside. One of the things that they very clearly do have is the ability to push button, buy token, and feel like you participate in it. And so I'm curious if you can comment on just the complications there, maybe the trade-offs that get made there.
Yeah, I mean, there are trade-offs, to every sort of launch mechanism, right? With most meme coin launch pads, like what's one of the biggest issues? It's like the tokens getting sniped, right? And that can be, through team or insiders, doing so for semi-nefarious reasons, or that can just be like bots trolling the chain. And so if you see liquidity, that does make it a little bit easier. Folks can just buy in and stuff like that. But, you have a question of in what order was it bought? And we've seen 100 examples of the pumps and dumps and things that you see happen with that. I think the beauty of this is that, yes, this is probably a launch that, at least at the beginning, right, it's going to be mainly for sophisticated players. But by virtue of it going to 4-year VE Aero lockers, these are sophisticated players, right? These are folks who have maximally locked their tokens, who participate in incentivizing liquidity pools each week, who sort of know how to make, I think, these types of choices. And then there's a trade-off too, and of course, just the amount of volatility and craziness. But I think you can just go, well, that's going to happen for a few days, but it's born of the fact that there is no one in control. This is the market purely. And there aren't any snipers because there isn't any initial liquidity, being seeded. And so I think we're very, very excited about it. I think it is, it is a bit more on the advanced side, but in theory, VE Aero voters are good community, I think, to go bet on the advanced side. But hey, here's the other thing is, if you are a VE Aero voter and you kind of look at this and you're going, I just don't know how to figure out how much to vote for, this pool of tokens with no price. Everybody else who goes and votes for that is just raising your rewards. If you're going to keep your votes on the CDBTC pool, they can go speculate. They can go play this initial launch of Syndicate, and then you have the benefit of being more of the collective voting power, not voting for it. So in a way, everybody wins. And, I just especially like that, these tokens now are not going to a centralized exchange, which is going to dump them. And, again, not Coinbase. Coinbase has never done this, but many centralized exchanges will ask for 5 to 10%. So that's why you see these launches, right? And everything goes crazy. And then it's boom. It's because all those tokens allocated to an unaligned community, are being sold out quick. And you can see the same with predatory market maker arrangements and things like that too. So it's a new kind of launch. It's going to be an experiment. It's going to be a bit crazy. But we think if more tokens adopt something like this, if this is successful, that the industry itself will be better off for it.
How long do the aero emissions last after like the voting period and this pool goes live? I guess I'm curious how like sticky this incentivized liquidity is.
Mhm.
My guess is you're gonna have a bunch in kind of the early stage during price discovery, which is obviously a very important period to have deeper liquidity. And does a bunch of that just leave, and that's okay because you're kind of in this more stable market conditions? Or how do you think about the kind of liquidity post launch?
Yeah, so I mean, voters will vote for basically a week's worth of emissions, right? So whatever the final vote is on Wednesday, those emissions will stream over the course of a full week. And the syndicate team will continue to incentivize, right? This will not be the only incentive they put up. But after, the pool is seeded, there's liquidity. Now it'll be an incentive like any other, right? There'll be a price associated with it. There'll be a voting APR. So it'll be kind of like any other incentivized token. And so the emissions will continue to stream. But then, of course, we also expect there to be a large number of fees on top of the incentives now that are organically attracting voters and will help to sustain it over time. And that's what we see with launches, right? In that first week, there might need to be a little something extra put forward, to help bootstrap things. It's the most efficient way to do this, much more efficient than depositing an incentive on Uniswap or things like that. But then over time, as fees ramp up, as liquidity ramps up, these things become much more self-sustaining.
All right, I always have so many more questions for you than we have time for. So I'm going to ask my last question. I'm very interested about the Coinbase DEX integration. So I think you noted here, DEXs have recently been integrated directly into the Coinbase app, and that unlocks Aerodrome and these markets to like truly millions of users. My understanding is that that's being done in a staged rollout. And so I guess my big question is like, what has the impact been this on so far? Like, are you seeing significantly higher volumes? Where are we in that process?
Yeah. So far, you're correct. It's a staged rollout. So our understanding is right now only about like 10% of Coinbase's 100 million users have access to it. But it's also staged in another way, right? Which is that the Coinbase team right now is just focused on rollout. They've got a lot more plans, to get Coinbase users aware of, engaging, making the discovery and trading experience on Coinbase, all these tokens, much more robust. So we have seen volumes, right, on base increase, and we track retail volumes through aggregators, and we have seen them increase. But I think we've just seen a fraction of the impact so far. And that comes not just from 100% rollout, but everything else Coinbase is going to do to turn themselves into the everything exchange and to ensure that their customers are seeing and accessing and participating in this on-chain economy.
I actually see this one last question you have here, Josh, that you ask all the time. So I think I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if you can say any more about Redacted Labs. I love trying to pull a little bit of alpha out of people. You kind of hinted at it last time. We're a month later. Is there
Yeah.
is there any more you can say?
Yeah, I mean, there is maybe a bit more I can say. I'll give you guys the first in on this news. So we'll be dropping a save the date today for an event we'll be holding November 12th in New York City, where we will be talking about Redacted Labs. We'll be talking about the future of the MetaDex and where things are going next.
So we got the announcement of the announcement alpha here, Josh. Good job, my friend.
It's something. Let's go.
Alex, really appreciate you hopping on with us, man. And you've been a good guide to us in sort of this wild world of initiating new markets, clearly right at the core of what crypto can unlock. So we'll be following along and wish you well. And you look great today, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. You guys too. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Cheers, dude.